Rain didn't fall that afternoon, it descended, heavy and merciless, like the world itself was exhausted. Outside Mercy General Hospital, where life and death crossed paths every minute, an even harsher storm was forming. A 6-year-old girl stood alone on the wet asphalt, her tiny frame trembling against the cold wind. Sophie Turner. Sky blue dress. Dirt on her cheeks. Tears cutting crooked paths down her face. She wasn't crying because she was lost, she wasn't crying because she was scared of the storm, she was crying because the people who should have helped, refused. Behind her, 3 men blocked the hospital entrance, laughing, jeering, treating her mother's suffering like entertainment. Her mother, Laura, weak and barely conscious, struggled to breathe as she leaned against the glass doors the men refused to open. Please, please let my mommy in, Sophie begged, voice cracking like a thread about to snap, but cruelty has a way of pretending it doesn't hear. Bystanders walked past. Cars rushed by. No one stopped. And Sophie's screams grew smaller, swallowed by the city. Then came that sound, a deep, rolling thunder from down the street, not from the sky, but from engines. .5 motorcycles. Chrome glinting. Tires humming like the heartbeat of a rising storm. They slowed. They stopped. And the city held its breath. At their front was a man carved from asphalt and time, Ryder Callan, a legend whispered in half-truths and road stories. His eyes cut through the chaos, landing on the crying girl, the blocked doors, and the fading mother, and for the first time that day, Sophie's fear loosened, because she saw something in those mirrored glasses. A promise. What happened next would make people believe in humanity again, and prove that angels don't always have wings, delivering a single coherent narrative, structured and expanded, without breaking tone. The storm hadn't yet reached the city, but the wind already carried the metallic smell of rain and the tension of something coming. Mercy General Hospital, a place where hope and heartbreak crossed paths every hour, stood tall against the gray sky. But on that afternoon, one small child stood at its gate, and the whole world seemed to forget how to care. Sophie Turner was only 6, but she already understood what fear looked like. She saw it in her mother's eyes every night as she tried to hide her coughing. She heard it in the doctor's words when they said the infection was worsening. She felt it every morning when her mother forced herself to go back to the diner job that barely paid for her medication. That morning, the fear became real. Laura collapsed on the kitchen floor. Not gently. Not slowly. Her body folded like a falling tree, and the sound of her hitting the tiles had jolted Sophie awake. The little girl had shaken her, cried for her, begged her to breathe. Laura, half-conscious, whispered for her to get help. Sophie grabbed her mother's hand and ran barefoot down their street until someone stopped their car. The driver helped them into the back seat and dropped them at the hospital gate before rushing off to work, promising Sophie the nurses would come right away. But today, the hospital's main doors were under construction. The only open entrance was the side gate, and it was being guarded by 3 contractors hired for temporary security. They were not trained security. They were not hospital staff. They were rough men, construction workers paid to stand there, smoke, and keep people out of the renovation zone. To them, Laura wasn't a patient. She was a nuisance. When Sophie pulled on their sleeves, they laughed. When Laura stumbled against the glass, pressing a hand to her chest, they told her to wait her turn. Shift change, one said. Come back in 20 minutes. As if 20 minutes wasn't enough to kill her, Sophie cried harder. She screamed for help. She clung to her mother's arm. But people passing by looked away, pretending they didn't hear a child begging for a life, and then came the noise, low at first. A distant rumble. A vibration in the asphalt. .5 motorcycles turned the corner like kings of the road, engines growling, chrome catching what little sunlight broke through the clouds. They slowed as they approached the hospital gate, and the men blocking the entrance finally looked up. Then the bikes stopped. Engines cut. Silence fell, thick, heavy, expectant. At the front, a man stepped off his bike, Ryder Callan, late 40s. Broad shoulders. Gray-shot beard. Tattoos climbing his arms like a map of battles he survived. A leather vest with 2 patches, Hell's Angels and RL Chills. A man who lived by his own rules, but today, the rules were simple. A child was crying. A woman was dying. And 3 men were standing in the way. Ryder slid off his sunglasses. His eyes, cold, sharp, impossibly steady, took in the entire scene in a single sweep. Sophie's tear-stained face, Laura crumpling by the glass, the men smirking, the bystanders pretending not to see that he walked toward Sophie first, boots thudding like thunder in slow motion. He crouched, bringing himself to her height. "What's wrong?" he asked. His voice was low, rough, but steady. She pointed to her mother and choked out the words, They won't let my mommy in." There was no hesitation. Ryder stood. The air around him changed. Something in his posture made the temperature drop. Without looking back, he handed his gloves to the biker behind him, then he walked toward the men at the gate. His brothers followed, 5 shadows moving with purpose. The tallest, Mace, looked like a mountain wearing boots. The youngest, Dex, walked with the silent confidence of someone who'd grown up on the back of a bike. The other 2, Slater and Ghost, flanked Ryder like loyal wolves. The 3 gate guards straightened up. Their laughter died. Ryder stopped inches from them. "Move," he said, just one word. But it landed like a command from someone who expected obedience, and usually got it. The man in the gray hoodie scoffed. "Hey old man, back off, this is a restricted." Ryder stepped forward by 1 inch. Just one. It was enough. The thug's voice died mid-sentence. Mace cracked his knuckles behind Ryder. Dex tilted his head. The air felt tight. The man swallowed. His bravado crumbled. He stepped aside. The second man pocketed his phone video fast. The third muttered something about, "just doing our job." As he moved out of the way, Ryder didn't acknowledge them. He walked straight to Laura, who was barely conscious now. Her head lifted weakly as he approached. "You're going inside," he said quietly. She couldn't respond, but Sophie nodded for her. Ryder placed Laura's arm over his shoulder and lifted her gently, as if she weighed nothing. The automatic doors finally slid open, and nurses rushed forward, shocked by what they saw. Within seconds, doctors pushed a stretcher forward. They checked her vitals, called codes, and disappeared with her into the emergency ward. Sophie ran beside them until a nurse stopped her and promised they would update her as soon as they stabilized her mother. The doors closed. Ryder stood outside, arms crossed, watching through the glass for as long as it took. His men stayed beside him, silent pillars. When a nurse finally signaled that Laura was receiving treatment, Ryder exhaled. His shoulders eased. Sophie walked out to him slowly, holding her hands together, unsure if she should speak, but when he turned, she ran straight into him, hugging him tight around the waist. Her sobs were softer now, relief, not fear. "Thank you," she whispered. He brushed her hair back gently. "You're braver than most grown men I've met." He reached into his vest, pulled out a folded $20 bill, and placed it in her palm. Someone had written on it in pen, "For Mom's medicine." He didn't wait for thanks. He didn't stay for praise. He simply nodded to his men, and they returned to their bikes. The engines roared back to life, echoing through the street like a promise kept. Nurses watched from the windows. Bystanders stared with something like shame. And Sophie stood with her little fists closed around the note, as if it were treasure. When Laura woke that evening, her daughter was beside her bed. "Who helped us?" Laura whispered. Sophie smiled. "Angels, Mommy. Hell's Angels." And for once, the world felt right.